Hey, this is Mark, and this is episode 26 of the Why Are We Still Doing This podcast. For me, growing up in the 80s and 90s was pretty awesome. And this is a blanket statement I've probably made many times before on this show, and one that most people my age would agree with. In fact, I've never heard anyone my age say, the 80s totally sucked. I'm thinking if you felt the 80s sucked, my guess is your family was part of something like the Children of God cult and missed out on eating an entire box of Hostess donuts while watching Saturday morning cartoons. That was something I vividly remember doing. Sitting in front of the TV watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and eating 3 to 4 Hostess powdered donuts. That was my breakfast on Saturdays. And when we say sat in front of the TV, we literally sat in front of the TV because the TV was on the ground, housed in about half a cord of wood. When we say sat in front of the TV today, in 2026, we mean we sat in a recliner maybe 6 feet away from the TV. In the 80s, kids sat literally a foot away from the TV because it was literally on the ground, most likely, and we didn't have 4K HD television. So you had to get closer to kind of see what was going on. A Sega Genesis had controllers with only a 3-foot cord. 3 feet. You were literally face to face with your television if you were a gamer back then. And let me clarify that I was a legitimate child of the 1980s. I was born in January of 1981. I know a lot of people claim to be a child of the 80s, but they're like, I was born in May of 1988. Yeah, but you kind of missed out on most of the decade. It's like you're on the team, but you're really not going to get much playing time. The world has changed a lot since the 1980s, and sometimes as parents, we wish that our children could experience the same childhood that we had. We're constantly pushing our favorite movies on them, as I've talked about, our favorite toys, hoping to see a little bit of ourselves in them and possibly relive our childhood through them. Older generations always feel like their childhood was, quote, simpler. Most of the time, childhoods were simpler. You didn't have to remember to get your car inspected, have your furnace cleaned, or plan dinner every night of your life until you die. Unless you were living in significant poverty or had domestic violence in your home or just incredibly dysfunctional parents to begin with, hopefully your childhood was, quote, simpler. I would have loved for my kids to experience the 80s. Simple technologies, hair metal, and $2.99 value meals from McDonald's, which was a price that our parents still complained about. But there's one aspect of the 1980s and early to mid-90s that I'm glad my kids will never have to experience, and that is smoking in public places. Most notably restaurants. I remember watching Mrs. Doubtfire with my kids for the first time a few years ago, and there's a scene toward the end of the movie where they all show up to a restaurant and they have a reservation. And the maitre d' or host asks them, smoking or non-smoking? And my kids looked at me confused and said, smoking? And we had to explain to them that a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, ancient civilizations believed there were invisible force fields in restaurants that allowed smokers to huff down as many Pall Mall 100s as they could on one side of the restaurant, and the non-smokers, just a few feet away, could enjoy their patty melt from Friendly's without cigarette smoke encroaching on their meal. Smoking sections were a joke. If I really think hard enough, I can still picture being in a Friendly's restaurant as a kid, sitting in a booth in the non-smoking section, and on the other side of the booth sat another booth with a divider, maybe a foot above my head and an inch wide, was the smoking section. That's it. That's all that's separated between the non-smoking and the smoking section. I can smell the smoke, which then blended in with the taste of my cold ice cream sundae, the ice cream staying ice cold from the cold metal sundae dish created this unique experience of a taste and a smell combining to create a memory for me. It's this taste in my mouth of metal, cigarettes, and vanilla bean. My mom worked at Friendly's restaurant for most of her life, and I was constantly there as a kid. And while she never came home from Friendly's smelling like cigarettes, she often smelled like greasy hamburgers more than anything. And our dogs at the time would lick said grease off her work shoes on a daily basis. My sister and I found it absolutely repulsive. And I remember being a kid in the 1980s, walking into Friendly's, and as soon as you walked in, to the right of the hostess station was a large cigarette vending machine. Now, some of you in your early 30s and younger are probably a little confused, but yes, the 1980s had cigarette vending machines. Literally anyone could purchase cigarettes from this machine. No age verification was needed. There was nothing technologically advanced about this. You didn't have to scan or present an ID to anything or anyone. All you needed was the right amount of quarters, and a shiny new pack of Camel 100s were all yours. Little Johnny could have rolled up to Friendly's on his super cool BMX bike with baseball cards in the spokes, walked right in, plunked in some quarters, and left with a fresh pack of Marbs, as the cigarette smokers of America would say. Pack of Marbs was condensed to one word at some point. Now, realistically, a young boy would not be able to purchase cigarettes from said vending machine because an employee at the restaurant surely would have said, "Son, you can't buy those." And then little Johnny would say, "Oh, here's a note from my mom." And realistically, the restaurant employee would say, "Ah, sorry, kid. Didn't know you had a note." That was literally a thing when my parents were kids. Their parents would send them to the store with a note for cigarettes. The cigarette vending machines were huge. And when I say huge, I don't mean like popular, but they were large in size. I remember them being longer width-wise rather than tall like a vending machine that would supply chips or drinks. And they didn't have buttons to push, but rather handles like on a foosball table. You'd plunk in your quarters and pull on the handle to dispense your cancer sticks of choice. And I remember as a kid, I would always go up to it and frantically pull on the handles like I was playing an intense game of foosball. Not once did a pack ever fall out, though. The last time I saw one in use in an establishment was almost 20 years ago. And even then I was surprised. I was at a gentleman's club for a bachelor party and couldn't believe it was still there. It was like seeing an old friend, or I guess an acquaintance, since I was never a smoker. I only experienced cigarette smoking in bars for a year and a half or so before it officially ended in Massachusetts. And thinking about it now, whenever I would go out to a bar in college, I don't remember there being really anyone smoking indoors. However, when I'd go home for a weekend or in the summer and go to a small town bar, it was like visiting a haunted house where someone left the fog machine on from Spirit Halloween. Cigarette smoke so thick, you'd need to turn on your fog lights in order to order a drink And the aftermath of it all, coming home at the end of the night from a smoke-filled bar as a non-smoker, I can remember stripping down in my bathroom, removing every piece of clothing, and taking the hottest shower of my life. Every time. That right there is also on par with spending a sweltering summer day at a Six Flags theme park. Stripping down and wanting to burn the clothing you wore, not knowing if washing them in the hottest, most scalding water with detergent would rid them of a full day's worth of bacteria from other people's sweat and unwashed hands you've acquired that day. Luckily, I didn't grow up in a house with parents who smoked in the house. Working in a public school, I often encounter kids who come in the morning with clothing soaked in cigarette smoke. In a previous job, I would meet with families in their home, often those of a low socioeconomic status. And sometimes those people I was meeting with would be smoking cigarettes while I was meeting with them. And sometimes they'd say, "Do you mind if I smoke?" And what am I going to say? This is your house. You can do what you want. Who am I to say, put that cigarette out? I do have some friends that still smoke cigarettes. If you've listened to the show in recent months, you'll know that I have two friends who've been part of the podcast that are actively trying to quit. They both realize that they're in their mid-40s and have been smoking since they were practically teenagers. And one of them even received a note from their daughter asking him to quit. When I was in my 20s, I looked at my friends that smoked cigarettes and thought they'd all quit eventually. I thought smoking at that time was still something that kids did because they thought it was cool. As I got older, I realized that no, some people cannot kick this habit and need nicotine to get through the day. My son hates cigarettes, absolutely hates it. And I have no idea where this hatred of cigarettes comes from. You'd think his hatred comes from some trauma of his parents, my wife and I, smoking around him constantly and duffing cigarettes out on his forehead. He's always asking me about my friend Colin, who's been on the show multiple times, and says, "Why does Colin smoke?" And when he first asked me that question, I had a lot of trouble trying to come up with an answer. My son once asked me, "Why do we wear underwear?" And it was a question that stopped me dead in my tracks, paused for a few seconds and said, it's a good question. I had no immediate answer to the question of, why do we wear underwear? It shouldn't have been that hard. Anyway, Connor is always asking me, why does Colin smoke? And I remember trying to give my best answer I could that would make sense to a then 7 or 8-year-old. I think I said something like, cigarettes sometimes help people relieve stress. And his reply to that was, well, why doesn't he just go for a walk instead? Why doesn't he go for a jog? And I said, you're kind of right. But I also told him it's not that easy. And some people get addicted to cigarettes. And my son said, he should just blow out a candle. And he said blow out a candle because at school, the kids were taught some breathing techniques to de-stress. And, quote, blowing out the candle is one of those breathing exercises. But to a child, it's all so simple. Just go for a walk instead of smoking a cigarette. It's that easy. And in reality, that is a piece of the puzzle. Not the whole thing, but just a piece. I remember when I turned 18, there were a couple of times that I bought cigarettes for my friends. One time, a friend of mine asked me to buy for him, so I went to the grocery store and asked for what he wanted. And when I came out of the store and gave them to him, apparently I had bought the wrong kind. "These are unfiltered," I can't smoke these, he exclaimed. Well, how was I supposed to know the difference? He's like, can you bring them back? I'm like, bring them back? These are cigarettes, not a pair of sneakers. I said, so you want me to go back into the store and say, hi, yes, I've been an avid smoker for a couple years now, and I realized I bought the wrong kind of cigarettes. So can I exchange it for the right kind? He's like, basically. So that's what I did. I went back in and exchanged a pack of cigarettes. And I came out and said, that's it. I'm done buying cigarettes for anyone. And it was, in fact, the last time I ever bought cigarettes for anyone. I have never smoked a cigarette in my life. Just never have. I feel like I'm in an extreme minority, but I feel like in my generation and generations past, everyone has at least tried it once. The phrase, don't knock it till you try it, does not apply to cigarettes. I'm gonna knock it. I had a friend whose parents saved enough Marlboro Miles to acquire a Marlboro pool table. Now, if you're not familiar with Marlboro Miles, it was essentially a rewards program for slowly killing yourself. You'd have to cut out the UPC code from the package and mail them into Marlboro headquarters or wherever they were taking them for whatever prize you chose. And those prizes could range from a trucker hat to a literal full-size pool table. And obviously, the bigger the prize, the more, quote, miles or packs of cigarettes you'd have to smoke. It was very similar to fundraisers in elementary school. You'd have a plethora of prizes to earn, usually culminating in something like a Super Nintendo or a portable TV, which was practically impossible to obtain. I'd love to see a documentary on school fundraisers in the 1980s and 1990s and see who actually, if anyone, won or came close to anything like a gaming system or a portable TV for selling 20,000 rolls of wrapping paper or 14,000 tubs of cookie dough. Anyway, with Marlboro Miles, you could earn trucker hats, jackets, duffel bags, Zippo lighters, tents, sleeping bags, watches, blankets. And from what I've researched, you could win, and this is for, quote, high-level collectors, a trip to the Marlboro Ranch, which was an 18,000-acre property owned by Philip Morris, used for marketing, corporate events, and customer rewards, according to Google. I can't imagine what a, quote, high-level collector would look like. Like, literally, what do those people look like? Most likely, awful from decades of smoking. Maybe they pay for your funeral expenses? A Marlboro-themed casket? A special appearance by the Marlboro Man at your wake? If you didn't know, the Marlboro Man was this fictional character, basically a cowboy that chain smoked but looked like he still took care of himself. Somehow the Marlboro Man had a perfect complexion and not one that resembled an old catcher's mitt from years of smoking. I remember as a kid going to a minor league baseball stadium a couple towns over and there being a giant cutout of the Marlboro Man in dead center field just over the wall. I found 2 of these on eBay, one selling for $60,000. I know people with some pretty unusual collections. However, I don't know anyone who has a collection of Marlboro memorabilia. I probably know more people with a collection of their own toenail clippings than those with a collection of Marlboro memorabilia. I don't know what would allure people to collect Marlboro swag. Like, all these things killed half my relatives. I remember seeing stuff like 20 years ago, promotional ads like, "Our generation will end smoking." Well, 2 decades later, we're still here. Much like the Electoral College, I don't think cigarettes will ever become extinct. I think it's just too insurmountable. I think we've made leaps and bounds, but I don't think I'll see smoking completely wiped out in my lifetime. Again, I've never smoked a cigarette, but I do remember trying sips of beer, probably when I was like 10 or 11 at family cookouts. I can vividly picture being on the deck at my house and my father handing me a cold Pabst Blue Ribbon. And I remember my reaction just being very much, ugh. Tasted like cat pee and stale bread. Not that I know what one of those things tasted like, but I can imagine. My daughter tells me about kids in her school vaping in the classroom. Literally sitting in the back of the class and taking a rip off a vape pen. She told me about a kid in her class who apparently took too many rips and fell out of her chair and started convulsing. Like, what? I have a lot of patience with kids, especially in a school setting, but I feel like I would lose my cool if I caught a kid doing that in my class. The majority of my work in schools has been with elementary age children and some middle school. I only subbed in a high school once, and that was for half a day, and they watched a movie. But that was 20 years ago. And back then, and even further back, like back in my day, it was, quote, smoking in the boys' room. And now it's vaping in the classroom. Going back to restaurants, I saw a TikTok video of a family of 6 that was trying to show how they save money when going out to eat. And I immediately knew where this video was going as soon as I opened it. The first thing the dad in this video says as he's standing out front of Olive Garden with his family is, "Feed your family of 6 cheap at Olive Garden." So before I take you on this ride, and this is part of my ADHD brain at work here, I actually went to Olive Garden for the first time in about 12 years this past December. And honestly, it was really good. I'm normally staying away from chain restaurants for sit-down meals, and I've always kind of poo-pooed and made fun of boomers who eat at Olive Garden on the regular, but it was honestly really good. Anyway, when you eat at Olive Garden, you normally get a shitload of breadsticks. Unlimited, I'm pretty sure, and a big salad for the whole table when you order entrees. So right there, that's a good amount of food. This family of 6 goes into Olive Garden and says, we're going to do 2 of the tour of Italy and do it family style. If you're not familiar, the tour of Italy is a combination entree comprising 3 dishes: chicken parmesan, lasagna, and fettuccine alfredo. One of these cost $23.49. The family ordered 2 of these. No drinks, just water. Their total for feeding a family of 6 at Olive Garden was $48.69. Now, first off, let me just draw the line in the sand right now and say this is, in complete PG terms, a total Richard move. Unless, that is, you tip the server a much larger percentage of the bill. And I'll tell you why. The bottom line is that waiter or waitress that took care of them that evening made half of what they could have made if another family of 6 came in and they each ordered a meal for everyone. This is one of those unwritten baseball rules that you just don't break. It's no secret that waitstaff live off their tips. So why would you knowingly pull a move that robs them of their wages? Now, I know what you're saying. But Mark, taking a family of 6 to a restaurant is an expensive night out. They're just trying to save money. Trust me, this family in question was not struggling. Even looking at their TikTok page, they had enough followers to be making quite a bit of money from their videos. If you live in a cardboard box of a house, are trying to make ends meet, utilize food pantries and food stamps, and going to the Olive Garden is a once-a-year big day out for your family, then I totally get why you'd want to save money in any way possible at Olive Garden. Would that totally suck for the waitstaff? Yeah, it might. But if you are more than capable of feeding your family of 6 at Olive Garden and are doing this so you can go on yet another cruise this year or for whatever, that's not cool. Why don't you just bring your own food to the restaurant at this point? What's stopping you? Like, yes, we're going to have the chicken parmesan, but we'd like you to use these chicken breasts we bought at Costco. We used a coupon. Bring your own drinks. Seriously, what's stopping you? Whip out an ice cold Pepsi in a can from your coat pocket and crack it open. And don't tip before the tax. Tip on the total amount. Is it really that big of a difference? I do this because I care. I go in making sure the waitress or waiter is going to get a good tip. I just can't imagine not giving a crap about whether or not the waitstaff is going to get a good tip. It's like recycling. It's a pain to sort and would be so much easier to just throw it all away. I just wish for a short time I couldn't care so damn much. I hate the fact that I overtip. I normally give a $10 tip on a $25 haircut. I care. I don't know. I think about other people. It goes along with how I vote, too. Sometimes when I vote, I think about how no matter who wins a particular election, I'll be okay. However, I think about what happens to certain groups of people if a particular candidate wins. A lot of people don't think that way. That's okay. I wish they would, though. I think a lot of people vote for the person who will make them the most money. And while that's great, I am fortunate that no matter who gets elected, I will be okay financially for the most part. But it's the people at the bottom that I often think about when I vote. Single moms, people with disabilities, chronic conditions that prevent them from really living to their full potential. And there's a lot of people with a ton of money who will vote for people who will make them even more tons of money. More money to buy another stupid boat. And they can do that all they want, but to me it's just greedy. It's like going to Olive Garden when you and your wife are making 6 figures each and doing stuff like splitting a meal and tipping before the tax. For a long time, any time I was asked for a donation, whether to round up my purchase or donate an extra dollar to the museum I was visiting, I would always oblige. I would do so because I thought it was good karma. And if I didn't, well, something bad was going to happen. And it got to the point where I was doing it all the time. And one day I had to scale it back a bit. And what made me scale it back a bit was something I saw while visiting the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. My daughter and I were there waiting in the checkout line in the gift shop, and a man in front of us was making a purchase. Taking one look at what this guy was wearing, I could tell he was making quite a bit more than I was. Yes, I know this is incredibly prejudiced, but when someone is wearing a t-shirt by a brand that sells for a t-shirt for $180, it's quite obvious they're doing okay. Or they've racked up $800,000 on an American Express account. But when this guy made the purchase, the cashier asked him, "Would you like to donate $1 to the museum?" And the guy looked up and said, "No, thank you." And my first thought was, what a jerk. But it also made me realize I don't have to contribute all the time. And if I don't contribute one time, it's okay. It got me thinking of the Seinfeld episode where George tips the guy at the pizzeria, but the guy behind the counter doesn't actually see George putting the dollar bill in the tip jar. I want people to know that I contribute, and I also don't want people to think I'm a cheap bastard. But then again, why would I care what they think? I'm never going to see this random cashier 800 miles from my house ever again in my life. Speaking of cashiers and customer service, I've said it before and I'm going to say it now, but I think it is imperative that everyone work in customer service at some point in their life. Why? Because you learn so much about how to problem solve. You learn so much about handling conflict. You learn so much about patience. You also learn so much about mathematics, like trying to calculate the new price of a $45 shirt that is 35% off. Everyone should at least once in their life run a cash register on Black Friday and have a line of customers that stretches out into the mall. And it's to the point it just doesn't stop. And you don't get a chance to pee until your lunch break. I worked at JCPenney on 2 different occasions in my life. Once during my junior and senior year of high school, and then again for about 10 years part-time when I moved back home in 2005. I could write a book about my experiences there, and maybe I will someday. But it always amazed me how sometimes, no matter how well you explained something, a customer still wouldn't get it. For example, JCPenney would often, and still does, a lot of gimmicky sales that have been at the core of their marketing for what seems like thousands of years. And one afternoon, I was at my register and a woman approached who had a question about something in the children's department. We walked over to a shelf of boys' jeans that were marked with a sale sign that said 50% off. And the woman said that she was reading the flyer that had advertised the same jeans on a special sale that was buy one, get one for a penny. I should clarify, buy one at regular price, get one for a penny. I was familiar with the sale and told her that that particular sale had ended yesterday. However, there was a new sale on the jeans that was realistically the same. In fact, I told her this current sale, she was actually saving 1 cent more than she would with the old sale. And I swear to you that I could not have explained this any clearer to her, yet she still didn't get it. She said, it's hard enough being a single mom and trying to afford clothes for your kids, and you guys have a sale like that changes. And I'm listening to her, and at least twice I calmly replied with, "Ma'am, it's mathematically the same price, even 1 cent cheaper today." I said, each pair of jeans is 50% off. So if the regular price is $40, they're $20 a piece. You get 2 pairs for $40. Okay? With the previous sale, you bought 1 pair of jeans for $40 and you got the second for 1 cent. You're actually saving 1 penny with this current sale. She still didn't get it. She left huffing and puffing without purchasing anything. I don't know what else I could have done to convince her she was getting exactly the same deal today as yesterday. It's like I literally wasn't even in the room when I was talking to her. I was literally talking to a wall. I don't know what else I could have said. And I think a lot of young people would have not had the patience for a situation like this and said, bruh, IDK WFT you want. But that's the magic of working in retail. It teaches you tremendous patience. The patience to have a middle-aged man with terrible halitosis yell at you for 5 minutes about how the pants he bought don't fit and it's somehow your fault, to then respond with, I'm sorry, sir. I'm happy to help you find something that suits your needs. Anyway, thanks for listening. This has been episode 26 of the Why Are We Still Doing This podcast. If you'd like to write in, you can do so at whyarewestilldoingthispodcast@gmail.com. whyarewestilldoingthispodcast@gmail.com. And I hope to have some more guests on the show in the near future. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.